And welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to be presenting a timeline presentation of ELT methods and approaches in English language teaching. So I'm Kevin Sanchez, one of the students from English Didactics 1. So basically, let's dive into the topic. But first, let's answer the following question. How did the approaches and methods originate? Well, to start, let me start telling you that the first method that they created was grammar translation method. So basically, this method started in Greece, and this method focuses on translating activities. Basically, this method is about just translation, right? Translation from the mother tongue language to the target language and vice versa. Then we have the direct, but yes, but in this method, there's something that happened in this method is that students were not encouraged to speaking to develop the speaking abilities. So students were like doing some reading activities, writing activities, but they were not focused. This method was not focused on developing the speaking abilities. After that, we have the direct method. And what is the direct method about? Since the grammar translation method was not focused on speaking, so that is why they decided to create this new method. And basically, this method was like even better because in this method, students were encouraged to use the target language that they were learning. Also, the activities from this method, they were aimed to develop the speaking abilities. So now let's dive into the timeline presentation that I have here. So basically, this is the timeline. In the 19th century, in the early 19th century, we have grammar translation method. And what is it? Well, basically, as I told you previously in the last slide, the grammar translation method consists on translating from one language to another language, right? That is translation. But something that the students were encouraged to do some reading activities, writing activities, and that's it, right? Students were not encouraged to develop the speaking ability. So this was one of the disadvantages from this method because students were not able like to speak a lot in the language, or the students were not encouraged to use target language because it was translation. Then we have, at the same time, in the 19th century, we have the direct method. So basically, the direct method, it was focused on developing the speaking abilities of the language, the target language. Also, something very important here, it was that no mother tongue was permitted. So students were encouraged just to speak the target language. Students, they were not permitted to use the mother tongue in the classroom. Also, we have the target language used, right? So as I told you, students must speak the target language that they are learning. Then we have the teacher. The teacher have to have at least native English, or it has to be a native English speaker in order to teach this class. After that, we have um, after that we have audiolingual method. And this method was interesting how this method appeared because this method started in USA and Britain in the 1940s and 1960s because, as you know, we have the World War #2. And basically the people who were in the arm, they were like they were trying to get what the enemies were saying or something like that. They needed to understand the others what they were saying, and they were not able to understand them. So that is why this method was created. So this method, it was great because it started there. And also some of the approaches is that in every lesson, all the classes started with dialogues related to real life examples, and also students were drilled by doing many different things. For example, when they were pronouncing some words or doing some pronunciation exercises, they were drilled, right? They were in that way they were improving a lot. And also speaking activities, they were drilled too. And also something that is really interesting over here is that skills are sequenced. What does it mean? That one skill was learned first, and once that skill was mastered, the other skill started to continue. For example, first they worked on listening. After that, they were working on speaking. And speaking, after speaking, they were working on reading. And the last macro skill that they were working on, it was writing. After that, we have communication language teaching. And what is it? This method, it's really important because this method, as the other methods, this method is focused on speaking, right? The students are encouraged to use the target language, and students are not permitted to use the mother tongue in the classroom. After that, we have the silent way. This is another interesting method, and you might be wondering why, because in this method, the teacher was in the classroom, but the teacher used to speak a little, a little. Who was going to speak the most was the students. The students were encouraged to use the target language and to speak a lot in the classroom more than the teacher. After that, the silent method, we have the suggestopedia. So this is another interesting method that we have. For example, students only use the target language. As you know, most of the methods, they request the student to use only target language and no mother tongue in the classroom. Since it really makes sense, right? Because they are learning another language, so that is why they should be using another language, not the mother tongue language. Also, something that was one of the approaches for this one is that every class started with music, and that is great, right? Because in that way, students work on listening, on the listening skills, right? So that is why it was great. Our students work on listening, but also students work on pronunciation because they listen how the words are pronounced. And also, students provide stories related to the target language that they are learning. After the Suggestopedia in 1978, we have, I'm sorry, it's 1980, we have task-based learning. This method was one of the methods that it was great. For example, is basically students were asked to develop communication practices. And what does it mean? That in this method, the students are encouraged to use target language, and also students are encouraged to use students are encouraged to put into practice their speaking abilities in the language. Also, we have real life examples. So since they were speaking in the classroom, they were speaking in real life examples on how to work on something like that. Then we have collaboration. What does it mean? Well, collaboration is that students in the classroom, they were working in pairs, right? They were working in pairs in order to create real life examples. After that, we have total physical response. And this is one of the methods that we still have nowadays. And you might be wondering why, because this method is so important when teaching kids. So I remember that I have watched many different videos on how to teach English to kids. And basically one of the approaches and methods that they use is total physical response, TPR. And this is very important because in that way we avoid saying that the kid, okay, kid, look at this, let's stand up. We use movements to represent, or we use our body to produce or to tell them how, or to teach them different things. So this is one of the good methods that we have. Now you might be wondering, what is the importance of approaches and methods in ESL teaching? Well, approaches and methods in English as a second language teaching are crucial, and you might be wondering why, because they provide a framework and guidance to the teacher on how to structure and deliver instructions too. Now let's move on to another one. So which are the most used? Okay, so basically in this part, there are many of them that are used, for example, but not all of them. For example, one of the ones that we have nowadays is we have communication language teaching, because as you know, its purpose is just to develop speaking abilities. Also the TPR method, because as I was telling you, nowadays, some teachers, they are teaching English to kids and they have to use TPR in order not to use the mother tongue in classes, right? So they use TPR. So in that way, students, like, they get in contact with the language. After that, we have the references. And basically, that's it. Thank you so much for being in this video. I really appreciate your time, and see you next time. Bye.